Hello, everyone. I know we're just a few minutes past, so we'll get started right away. I'm just letting everyone into tonight's webinar, tonight's conversation. Mika, Tamara, you can hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, so I want to make sure that we keep to our schedule. Everyone's slowly coming in, and I hope everyone at home is settled and ready to go. Welcome to tonight's webinar, The Ultimate Guide to T-14 Law School Acceptance. So we're Juris Education. I have a couple of housekeeping rules, so to speak. So first and foremost, the question I get on a weekly basis is this recorded? So yes, this webinar is recorded and you will receive a recording within a couple of days. So if you have to hop off at whatever time, we totally understand, but you will have access to this recording. So you can kind of go back, take notes, do what you got to do. In terms of how long this webinar is, we're looking at running it for about 45 minutes, half an hour of really great conversation from two extremely intelligent individuals, and of course, a Q&A session towards the end. So whether you save your questions towards the end or you want to pop them in throughout the conversation, we'll make sure to get to them. So a high-level agenda of what we'll be speaking about. So we'll speak about the key factors that the top 14 law schools look for in their applicants, how to create a strong application that stands out, and of course, strategies to boost your chances of acceptance. Now, I'd love to take just a few moments of your time. I promise it's only a few moments to chat about who we are at Juris. So whether this is your first webinar with us or maybe you've been to a few, welcome. We're super excited to have you here. So who is Juris Education? Well, we're a globally recognized law school admissions consulting firm offering comprehensive support from test prep to law school admissions and even bar exam tutoring. We have a 94% acceptance rate. Our students gain entry into the top law schools in the United States. Last cycle alone, our T-14 acceptance rate was 34%, which is almost 6 times higher than the national average of 5.7%. We believe in starting the law school application process as early as possible. For college sophomores, we offer pre-law advising and profile development. This focuses on building each student's professional cover letter and resume to highlight their most meaningful experiences and elevate their profile. To help candidates stand out, we assist in enhancing transcripts and GPA, identifying organizations and internships, creating a timeline for LSAT and application prep, and pinpointing specific areas of interest. Our goal is to help students gain a strong foundation and understand what schools are looking for when building a portfolio that will then set them apart from other applicants. While our counselor supports students in building their profiles, our LSAT coaches work closely with them to provide personalized one-on-one tutoring. Students take an official LSAT diagnostic test so tutors can assess their strengths and their weaknesses. This helps create a custom study plan structure for the days, weeks, and of course, months ahead. We tailor our approach to each student's unique needs and schedule, providing the right assessments and lessons as they become familiar with the test content, strategies, and format. Interim tests monitor and track progress, allowing us to modify study plans and build an upward trend to the official test date. On average, we'll see a 12-point increase for 45 plus hours of tutoring and offer a 165 plus LSAT guarantee with our 60-hour program. Once we've helped shape an outstanding candidate, we support students by creating the perfect application. Law schools review applications holistically, and we assist in every step of the process. Our support starts with a detailed profile analysis, deep diving into students' stats and experiences. This guides the creation of a well-balanced list of target schools, safety and reach schools, I should say. We also help build resumes and obtain letters of recommendation from the right recommenders. Our services continue through the interview process and include waitlist strategy support and scholarship assistance until students receive their acceptances. Our admissions counselors, who are also essay writing experts, will brainstorm, outline, edit your supplemental essays and personal statements until they are perfect. These essays showcase the best aspect of our students, connecting their life journeys with the themes of each school they apply to. Whether it's your main application or scholarship essays, we offer unlimited edits. Overall, our goal is to build the perfect candidate and application. We use every tool in our skill set to ensure the products we create with students stand out from the rest of the pack. If you're interested in learning more about us or packages, we offer personalized free consultations via video, phone, or email. Our admissions counselors are ready and willing to help you through the process, so you don't have to get navigated alone no matter where you are in the application process. That's a little bit more about us and my little spiel. I'd love to pass it off to our wonderful panelists to introduce themselves.
You want to go first, Tamar?
Sure. I'm Tamar. I use she, her pronouns. I went to the University of Michigan for law school. Before that, I was at Vanderbilt for undergrad. In between, I took 2 years off and did a Fulbright in Taiwan and then did AmeriCorps in the Chicago public school system. And now my main focus post-law school has been working with LGBTQ foster youth, name and gender marker changes, gender affirming care sorts of things. But I just transitioned to being a professor at a law school and classes started last week. So we are very busy over here. I'll pass it on back.
Hi, I'm Mika MacDonald. I attended the University of Chicago Law School. I went to undergrad at Claremont McKenna in Southern California. It's an econ psych major. I'm a bit older. I graduated in 2015, and I worked first I clerked for a judge, then worked as a corporate bankruptcy litigator for about 5 years. And then I left the practice of law in 2020 during COVID and came back to teaching, which is what I'd been doing before law school. So I'm really excited to be here and part of the webinar. I also do a lot of essay, admissions essay editing and stuff like that. I was persuasive in writing for money, for 5 years. And so I love helping students pitch themselves. It's a really fun and enjoyable process.
Perfect. Okay. I'm going to get us started with talking about application timelines. It is very important to stay organized. I can't believe it's the end of August, but it is. And it feels like the application process every year just flies by. So be careful of early deadlines. Every school kind of does their own thing. No one is following like a common sort of timeline. There are general parameters, right? Like applications generally open in September, but I have a student who already applied because one of her schools opened in August. So be mindful of when applications open, be very mindful of when early deadlines happen, especially if you're doing early admission somewhere. Regular deadlines, make sure that you know those. They can sometimes vary by like 1 week or a couple of days. And you definitely don't want to be the person who is like waiting till the end and then you missed it just by a day, because they will not find that a compelling reason for getting in your application late. Make sure that all of your documents are in, not just your stuff. You unfortunately have to chase your recommenders down. Your application is not done until your recommenders have submitted their things too. So make sure you're gathering all the things you need and giving sufficient time to get them in. Transcripts sometimes take a little bit. The CAS report takes a few weeks to pen. Make sure you're adequately giving time for those things. And then track your applications. I often like to use a Google Sheet and just see kind of where in the process it is. Many people apply to many law schools. I had a student last year who applied to 30. It gets hard to keep track of that. And especially if you're like getting emails asking for additional information or requesting an interview, you don't want them to request an interview and you forget to respond to that email. That is not a good look. So make sure you're really organized and on top of all of those things.
All right, application planning. So I can tell you just from an LSAT tutor perspective that you definitely want to start planning all of this well in advance, not 3 months in advance, and honestly, even 6 months in advance is pretty like risky strategy. So number one, start researching early on, right? Like sophomore or junior year, like start thinking, do you want to go to law school? Which law schools? How much time can you commit to that? What is your timeline, right? Start building a timeline into the future about, okay, I've got this year and 3 months. I'm going to focus my LSAT studies during the summer. And then at this semester, when I'm not too busy, really plan, right? Same with I guess that just covers the milestones, right? Have actual deadlines. One of the things I tell people as an LSAT tutor, use your calendar, right? Use your calendar. Literally put aside the time and block it out. Don't just say, oh, I'll go study tomorrow in the afternoon. That's easy to not do. But if you commit to going there from 3 to 5 p.m., if you commit to certain deadlines for personal statements and different parts of the application process, I guarantee it'll go a lot easier and feel a lot smoother, right? You definitely won't have to rush at the end, which is really what you want to avoid at all costs. Tailoring applications is genuinely an important thing. You'll have an automatic chance to do that with sort of YX essays, but think a little bit beyond just like writing a YX essay and think about how different schools perceive, for instance, diversity, might just perceive different. I'm not going to say like, I'm going to move past that. Tell schools genuinely why you want to be there. And I always tell students that it doesn't have to be groundbreaking. One of the most compelling reasons in the world is I grew up in this area, my family, my friends are in this area, and I want to practice in this area after graduation. That honestly is probably the most compelling YX essay out there because it's just straight up honest, right? So think about how you're going to pitch yourself to each school and what you can genuinely say about that school and why it matters to you. And I think this last one is really important, which is feedback, right? Have help with your essays. Get people to take a second point of view. Ask them, does this feel like me? Or am I putting on a different face to try and be more impressive? Because that's not a good idea, right? You need to communicate you while pitching yourself, which is different than pretending to be someone else, right? So get feedback from mentors, from peers, from anyone that you think can be helpful in this process, because the more help you get, the more constructive criticism you get, the better your application will probably be at the end of the day.
Can everyone see me? Oh, here it is. Okay. GPA. Your GPA matters. I get that question a lot. Like, does it matter if my GPA is really bad? And the answer is it probably does matter. A lot of it is common. I've been hearing a lot of students recently who had a really tough transition in COVID. I think admissions officers know that. Admission officers, law schools know that teaching law school students online was really bad, and they know that teaching undergraduate students online was really not great. So they expect that. They also expect that your GPA was likely lower as a freshman, right? We all had that year we were trying to figure out how to study best on our own, how to, what classes to take. Everyone was dropping out of their pre-med majors. Like all of that was happening freshman year. They expect that your GPA maybe was a little bit lower, and they expect to see kind of an upward trend. Nothing to be embarrassed about. Very, very common. That's all good. To back up, I think part of why law schools care about your undergraduate GPA is because they see that it often maps onto how you will do as a law school student. And they want to see that you are set up for success as a law school student, because they don't want you dropping out. They don't want you, maybe entering law school with really bad study habits or don't know how to study, because that would be really hard to manage in law school, right? And they want to make sure that you're set up for succeeding in the classroom and then ultimately for graduation and the jobs you will get with your law school GPA. So I think they see that it maps on to the type of student you might be able to be in law school. For T-14 schools in particular, you're really aiming for a 3.7 or higher. The higher, the better, unfortunately. But that is really the sweet spot that you're looking for. So if you are still in undergrad, make sure that you're still, even if you have a job lined up, or what you want to do afterwards, or you maybe have some serious senioritis, you really want to hold on and aim for those great scores up until the very end.
LSAT scores. Now we're really in my domain here. So yeah, let's just start with the LSAT is typically the thing that's given the heaviest weight. They don't have a lot of evidence for the LSAT predicting stuff, but they do have a fair bit for it predicting the first year of law school. At least there is a meaningful correlation. So schools care. For T-14s, right, you really need to be aiming in the 170s. I think Harvard's median is now 174, and they're not even in the top 3 anymore. So it is very competitive. And that's why I very much recommend, number one, use a prep course in a prep website. I have never met anybody that scored a 170 plus using Khan Academy. Just haven't. It's just not enough resources compared to what you can get through prep sites. Practicing with real LSAT exams goes without saying. You can license those from LSAT themselves. They have something called Law Hub. Once you sign up for that, which is unfortunately $100 a month, which I find nuts. But once you sign up for that, you have access to all of the historical prep tests. They've released 94 of them right now. They've now renumbered them since Logic Games is gone and reconfigured them. All of that is there. And once you sign up for a test prep website, you're also going to have to sign up for that anyways. So that's the main resource, Law Hub. That's where I would start if you're looking at the, they have 4 free tests there. So if you've never taken one before, you can just jump on and give it a little try. LSAT study is not something that should be done fast, right? Some people, sure. If you have nothing else going on and you can devote 35 hours a week to LSAT study, okay, maybe take it in 3 months. But even then, I still don't think you're probably maximizing your score. I estimate that I put around 200 hours in to get my first score of 172 and probably another 200 or so to get my 179. So time commitment matters here. The LSAT is a test of skills, not just of raw intellect. I know a lot of people think that, but that is absolutely not true. So they're learnable. The skill set is learnable, but it does take time because it's a gigantic skill set. So start early, especially if you want to be in the T-14.
So undergrad institutions, your undergrad school matters-ish is what I'll say. I think it's not the most critical factor. They're really looking for, they want to see a strong GPA, right? They want to see that you have been challenging yourself, that you are academically a strong candidate, that you have a strong LSAT. I think those things weigh really heavily. Sometimes the reputation of your undergrad school can provide a slight advantage in admissions, and it is definitely a factor that they'll consider. But I think all schools, but even in the T-14, I was shocked by how many undergraduate institutions are represented in a single class. Anything from really small liberal arts colleges to technical colleges. We have I went to law school with someone who is a doctor and had been a practicing doctor for half his career. And I dare say where he went to undergrad probably didn't matter very much in his application, right? And so all that to say, reputation can matter, and going to a great undergrad school is wonderful. And also there are other things that that matter more in this process. And so you should really be able to hopefully focus on a strong GPA that you have and a really great LSAT score. And maybe a prestigious undergrad institution can be a small bump if that is something that you have. I think you're muted.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, extracurriculars. There's always a lot of debate about how much these matter or don't matter. Number one, don't assume that something doesn't matter. And number two, I do think they matter. I think in terms of, the thing I always explain to my students is, whatever your stats are, there's someone else out there with the same stats, basically. So tie breaking is always relevant to this process. And so if you end up at Harvard's median on both things, they're going to look at these things. They're going to look at your extracurriculars. They're really going to look at that personal statement, right? They will look at these things. So leadership roles is definitely the biggest one, right? Something that you can talk about and explain that you are actively doing stuff, right? Something that is clear on the resume that this is not just, oh, I joined this club and didn't do much. but that you were involved, you were making things happen, you were in a leadership position, something along those lines. I had one student that volunteered at a prison once a week for teaching. And I was like, that is a fantastic soft, right? Every week he went down there for 4 hours for like 3 years, basically his whole college career. That's a level of commitment to public service that admissions officers will really like to see, right? So leadership, public service, those are probably the two best things that you could have on your resume. I think also being active within your school's community in some way is very valuable. First year of law school, basically everyone is going to join a study group, right? And this stuff is collaborative. Being able to show that you will be an active member of the community at the law school is also valuable, right? Admissions officers care about that. So that's what I would say with softs. If you want to stand out, it's leadership and public service above all other things. And it is showing that you'll be a great member of the community. Yeah. Turn it back over to, I think, Andrea for a sec. Oh, I hit it one too far.
I think it was me.
It happens. It happens. So awesome conversation so far. I just want to quickly peek in the chat to see if there's any questions. Let me just quickly check. I don't see any questions, but again, to our wonderful audience, please feel free to ask away. No question is too small or too large. We will try and answer as many as possible. I don't see any right now, so I'll let you ladies continue on with the conversation. I won't interrupt again until the end.
Fine.
You're always welcome to interrupt us. Okay, work experience. So I will start by saying not everyone has work experience. Some people go straight through, and that's totally fine. I do encourage you to think about what work experience might still be, even if you were in school. You might have worked part-time. You might have had unpaid internships that were essentially like working, right? You might have had other sorts of things. I don't generally recommend that high school things go on a resume. But if you did anything else that kind of looks like work experience, if you think creatively about what that means, those things should go on your resume. Legal internships are always great. Schools love to see that you have interacted with lawyers and you are familiar with dealing with cases or legal research or some sorts of legal topics. Those are great. Although I will also say I had 0 legal internships before I went to law school. I had done nothing legal, and that is also okay. Professional experience, right? Law schools actually love to see when people take some time off, which we'll talk about in gap years, but they love to know that you are coming to them as a professional. Law school is a professional school. They are not hoping to babysit you in any sort of way. They are hoping that you are coming to them with some of the kind of basic critical thinking, writing, sending emails, professionalism skills that being in the professional world, people often have or pick up on. And so being able to translate that from any sorts of work experience, even if they're not legal, those things are transferable, right? And then gap years. Gap years are, I think, and actually I've seen some law schools where students are like, should I come this year? And law school admissions officers often say, if you're thinking about a gap year, take it now, because you will never again have time to take a gap year. You will always have work and there will be other things that come up. So law schools do appreciate that you can do really creative things in gap years, and they will not hold that against you. I think they think that's really cool. University of Michigan, the dean at the University of Michigan always used to talk about how she loved how a student finished undergrad and took a year off to play the harmonica across the country. And that was like what he did for his gap year. And she just found it so endearing and interesting. And he crafted some really cool personal statements based on the things that he saw. So nothing is, any story can be a compelling story if you tell it right? And so make sure that you are leveraging the experiences you have, even not, especially non-legal, even non-legal experiences, so that they're telling the admissions officers a lot about you and ultimately making the reader think, wow, I really want this person to be at school with me.
Yeah, and that's what I'll continue highlighting. A lot of people think that personal statements need to be like these big grand things, that they need to be filled with trauma or adversity or all of this stuff. But at the end of the day, if a admissions officer reads your personal statement and doesn't really have a feel for who you are as a person, right, what your personality is like and how you're going to be like in their school, you've kind of failed. Right? You could tell the most compelling story in the world, but if at the end of it, the admissions officer goes, I have no idea what it would be like to have this person here, they're not going to admit you. So while it's important to focus on pitching why you're going to law school and telling these stories about yourself, remember to use I statements, feeling statements. Talk about how things impacted you, not just what happened, but how they changed you and what you did as a result, right? So I had a student who was a Nigerian American, and she had this very, very intense story about visiting Nigeria with her family and some corrupt police officers stopping them and basically shaking her father down for a bribe. And that's a hell of a story. But what she did really great with it was she really connected it to her passion for criminal justice reform, not just here, but within Africa as well. Right. And then she did a whole bunch of other stuff in college, all the way through, that built upon this narrative, right? That continued this idea that that experience shaped her and it is driving her towards law school, right? That's compelling. So connect your narratives, demonstrate who you are as a person, and finally, explain why law school, right? Why law over anything else in the world that you could be doing. But I would honestly say that that is the priority levels, right? Why law school is kind of thirdish. Also emphasize the importance of a personal statement. I think that they're the third most important thing in your admissions package. This is a profession that's built around words, right? And if you can't express yourself well on paper, that's going to reflect poorly on you as an applicant, right? Because most of your exams are essays. Basically, all of your exams are essays, time-pressured essays. So really, really work on making it both compelling and well-written, right? No typos, no errors when it goes out. Have someone you know that's good at writing take a look at it, maybe punch it up a bit. Talk to an admissions officer or admissions consultant here, right? That's what we do. But it's a really important piece of your application package. And I just really want to emphasize how you need to sell yourself as a person. Yeah. Right.
Okay. Crafting a strong resume. Resumes are annoying and important. And they are honestly a tool that I think helps tell your story, right? It's all part of a package. And hopefully you have a whole, I don't know, theme or, main story that you're telling, and your resume just continues to highlight that same thing, right? So if you're telling this admissions officer, this is why I want to come to your law school, or this is the type of person I am, I hope I am the type of person you would want at your law school, your resume continues to highlight that, right? You want to highlight the relevant experiences you've had. That can be work experiences, that can be research experiences, that can be jobs, that can be things that are relevant to the law, that can be things that are totally not relevant to the law. That can be hobbies, that can be leadership things, that can be honors and awards. There's so many ways you can craft a resume, and no two resumes that I've ever seen even have the same headings, aside from education, that is always the top one, right? But everything else, you can switch the language. You can have community engagement, you can have leadership, you can have campus involvement, you can have interest and skill. Like, there's so many things to do, and you should be making decisions on what to include and the language to include very strategically, and purposefully, so that it is really enhancing everything you're already saying in your personal statement about who you are, right? if you have like a laundry list of achievements, some people do honors and awards as a section on the top. That's something that you can do. There are other ways to emphasize them, like within certain positions, instead of having it kind of as a laundry list on the top. So there are lots of strategic decisions to be made about how you lay out your resume and the story that it tells, even though it's, a really small space and it's bullet points and, but there are lots of things that you can tell from just looking at someone's resume, and that is a story that you're also telling.
Yeah, totally agree. I just cannot agree more. Everything is part of your pitch. Everything is part of your story. I love that perspective. Interview preparations. I'm going to start with the right side first, because if you do not do mock interviews, you will not be fluid and comfortable in the real one. Go do mock interviews. Even if it's just with friends, go do mock interviews, right? Being put on the spot in an interview setting can be very nerve-wracking, and being practiced at handling that is very important. So really, do mock interviews beforehand. Common questions. Look, you guys kind of know exactly what's coming down the pipe in general, right? They're going to ask you questions about your academic history. They're going to ask you about the stuff that you put on your resume, right? About extracurriculars, about why you're going for law school, and about what you want to achieve once you graduate, right? So you really need to think the answers to every single one of these questions ahead of time. And I'm not saying memorize them, right? But you should have something very clear in your head from the get-go about what you're going to say, right? There is nothing that is, interviewers try to be nice, but if someone freezes in front of them on a question that feels standard, it will really not reflect well, right? Maybe if it's a weird question, right? One of their like random ones, almost every interviewer has some sort of like thing they do or a question they ask that's a little out of normal. It's okay to freeze on those. But if you get asked why law school and you blank out for 5 seconds, that's really going to look bad. Yeah. And I like this other bullet point, right? Really thoughtful, right? What are your motivations? That is the thing that you need to self-reflect on before you go into interviews, because that's the number one thing they're going to be asking about. What are your motivations for being here? Turn it back over.
Thanks. Financial aid and scholarships. So this honestly feels like it always drives me a little up a wall that this is like a totally second beast that you have to tackle after the first beast, which is the application process. This is really important to some candidates. This was really important to me. I knew I was going to be a public interest attorney. I knew I would probably be leaving law school making less money than I was making going into law school. And so financial aid and scholarships really mattered to me. It's important. There are tons and tons and tons of lists online. You do not need to reinvent the wheel. And honestly, I kept looking at those lists all through law school, because some of those are scholarships that you can apply to when you're a 1L, when you're a 2L, when you're a 3L. You can apply to some for summers, right? I, of course, was doing unpaid work during my summers. I needed money to do that. There's lots of cool things that you can apply for to get scholarships. Some of them require really specific things. Some of them require really general things, just a transcript and a resume. Some of them require essays that are kind of similar to a personal statement. See if you can kind of repurpose some of the writing that you've done in this process to apply for some of those scholarships. And sometimes, I love being like, yes, the $50,000 scholarship. I want that one. Everyone wants that one. Make sure you apply to some of the smaller ones too, right? Those are the ones that are probably going to get a little less attention, and you have a better shot at getting. So don't snooze on those. Make sure that you understand and follow application procedures for all financial aid things, not just scholarship stuff, but FAFSA stuff. If the school has specific asks that they have to consider you for their like internal pot of money, you've got to be on top of your email. You've got to be answering those questions. It is often a lot of digging up of files. You got to look for your old taxes. You got to, call up your parents sometimes and be like, do you remember what happened in this year? But you've got to do it. And the sooner you do it, the faster you do it, the easier it will be for them to give you an answer on how much money they're willing to give you. And then ultimately you might be able to play some of those places against each other. If you get a really great scholarship from one place, some places will play ball with you if you send them and say, I would really rather come to your school, but your competitor has given me X amount. Can you match that? And some schools will say yes. Plenty will say no. Plenty will say, good for you, have fun at that school. But some schools will say yes. And, or, you know, even if they can't match, they might up what they were offering you. And those are real dollars and they can go a long way. So make sure you're on top of it. Back to you.
So final application review, right? Perfection is what you should be hopefully achieving, at least with regards to spelling and grammar, okay? There's no reason to let errors slip through other than a lack of commitment to making sure that none slip through, right? I was an attorney. If I can write 28-page documents and have no typos in them, 2-page personal statements are very doable, right? And I will emphasize that is the perfection expected of you if you're going to be in big law as a litigator. I got screamed at like 3 months in for having like 2 typos in wasn't even in a brief. It was just in like a standard order, right? Didn't matter. If I'm not perfect, then I'm failing. So take that mindset with your application here. Make sure that your writing is perfect. Yeah, once you pull together the entire package, again, get someone to look at it for you, right? Whether it's a friend or a parent, like the whole thing, resume, personal statement, diversity statement if applicable, YX essays, right? Ask them, what do you think about the overall narrative, and am I telling it in an effective way, right? That's the best way to get a sense of how your overall admissions package is going to look to an admissions officer. On the right-hand side of this slide, right? Again, you need to be perfect about this stuff. Don't know your deadlines. Put them on your calendar or have them somewhere that actually gets them organized in a way that you'll pay attention to, right? Check formatting requirements, right? I know it doesn't sound like a big deal, but schools will get annoyed if you ignore explicit instructions that were given to you about how to format the stuff you're submitting, right? Just because it's not important, it's still really sort of a little disrespectful if you just don't bother doing it, right? And that could really work against you, especially if it's in a tie-break situation between you and another applicant. If you do miss deadlines, email the admissions office. Don't just try to like pretend like you didn't do it. Tell them, apologize, ask if it's okay. It's better to like own up to it and ask for permission to be late than it is to submit late and hope that they're just not gonna care that you did it late. So don't run from any screw ups either, right? Just most admissions people are really nice. Like they're just normal people in their like 30s for the most part. So if you like gently ask nicely, they're probably going to help you out. Yeah. Okay, back to you, Tamara.
Final tips. Number 1, use a checklist. I am a huge fan of a combination of my Google Calendar and a Google spreadsheet sheets document. I think those are super helpful. This will get super, even with the proper organization, it's overwhelming. I cannot imagine trying to do this without major checklists going on at all times. Number 2, make sure your personal statement and interviews really reflect who you are and are just genuine. I think attorneys do a lot of BSing in their lives. They know what BS sounds like. You do not want their BS radar to go off while they're reviewing your application. That is not good. You want to be who you are, and they will be able to sniff out anything else. And then number 3, make sure you're utilizing resources like advisors, mentors, prep courses, juris education, whoever you need to make sure that your application is as strong as it can possibly be, and getting input from people and asking them, can you read this and tell me, does this sound like me? Is this putting my best foot forward? Do you feel like this reflects who I am? And getting feedback from others is really, really important. And honestly, sometimes the most helpful thing, you're so deep in it that you can't always like figure out how it's all looking and how it all looks like it's coming together, and having a clean, fresh set of eyes can just be so incredibly helpful. I think it is back to you.
Hello. Fantastic conversation. So it's Q&A time. I think this is my favorite portion, and we have a question in the chat. So I think we'll lead with that, and then it'll give everyone a minute or two to kind of get those questions in, and even before that, just allow everything to digest. So first question, how many T14s extend interview offers normally? And when in the process do those offers and actual interviews occur? And again, T14s, not T4s.
I'll let you field that one. I'm actually not sure.
So the answer to this is it depends, which is my least favorite and most lawyerly answer I can give. So schools are very unique in how they approach interviews. For example, Georgetown does a group interview that is unlike any interview process I've ever seen. And it's changed in recent years. They give you like an admissions packet and ask a group of like 5 to 10 people to pretend that they're the admissions officers and to decide on 3 candidates if they should let those people into the law school. And that's it. That's the entire interview. And so there's like no, why do you want to go to law school questions? There's no, tell me about yourself questions. Like there's none of that. And sometimes they do these in person and sometimes they do them on Zoom. So that's Georgetown on one end of the spectrum. UVA notoriously does interviews for candidates they know they want to admit. They love me, and they also notoriously call you to tell you that you've been admitted. That is like part of their personality. Michigan does no interviews. No one in my class was interviewed, and all of us were like, maybe they should have interviewed some people because we can tell that we're missing some social skills here. So every school in the T-14 really does its own thing. Some of them really do it for people who are like border candidates. They want to check and make sure that, you know, would the personality fit okay? Some do. Obviously, Georgetown has kind of like that group interview thing. Some don't do them at all. So it just really, really depends on the individual school and the way that they think about what an interview will tell them about you. And so if you are asked, and you can sometimes surmise what that is at like when you can figure out when they're interviewing you. Are they interviewing you right after getting your application? Are they setting you up with an alumni interview? Alumni interviews probably have way less weight than one with the admissions officer, right? So there are kind of a bunch of factors you can weigh and think about to understand how they might be thinking about the interview, but every school in the T-14 really does its own thing, unfortunately. Is your experience any different?
Hey, honestly,
I actually don't know. Does U Chicago do interviews? No.
They didn't when I got admitted, at least. I remember Vanderbilt interviewed me. I think they do interviews, but I also lived in Nashville, so it might have just been, I was like local. It's like, why not? I don't know. I don't remember. I don't remember interviewing at UVA, but I did get admitted there, so they just didn't bother with me, I guess.
They also might have changed. They've had like some admissions changes in the past couple of years.
Okay, so this
I remember getting admitted, getting a phone call, and then all of my students last year were like, "Oh, they personally called me." So there seems to. So I guess this goes back to what we were saying. Things change depending on the kind of personalities of the admission officer, or like how that office is running.
Oh, I do think U Chicago interviews candidates for the Rubenstein Scholarship. That's the big full ride one there. So I think if you're competitive for that, they will ask you to interview for it. Yeah. But I think that's it, at least when I was there.
Very interesting. So I don't see any. Oh, Isabel, who asked that question, says thank you.
It's a great question.
And yeah, a really fantastic question. And I think what we'll do is we'll do a little bit more of a deep dive on our end. Like I said in the beginning, you'll receive a recording, and I'll include a couple of links, and maybe I'll do some more digging into what T-14s as of right now based off of this cycle, if they're doing interviews or not. So we have access to that information somewhere within our system. So I'll make sure to get that to our audience. I don't see any other questions in the chat, but we are over time by a minute or two. But I'd love to just ask you both before I let you go, unless more questions come in. Any sort of a piece of advice, any sort of feedback, anything that you have to share that we may not have covered based off of your own T-14 acceptance and the application process?
I can go first.
Yes.
Okay. So one thing I also emphasize to students is remember that emotional management is a huge part of this whole process, but especially with the LSAT process, right? Not burning out, staying motivated. Those are big things. Not giving into frustration when you plateau or looking for creative solutions or new ways forward is important. And staying emotionally balanced when you're actually doing the exam is wildly important. So think of activities and things you can do to help with that. If you don't have any sort of calming or mindfulness routine, maybe consider getting one. If you don't exercise regularly, maybe consider starting. Just find stuff that will help you manage the emotions and anxiety of this whole process.
That's honestly excellent advice. I think it's so hard to say this, and I know I wouldn't have listened to myself, and I'll say it anyway. It will work out. It will, like, calm down just a little bit. Have some faith that your story is a story worth telling and that you will land at the place that is right for you. There are lots of great ways to get a great legal education. There are lots of great ways to be a great law school student. And those things look different for every single person. I think when I first got to law school, I was so overwhelmed by all the study groups and that, like, it felt like everyone knew how to do law school. And I didn't have any lawyers in my family. I had never had a legal internship. Like, I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, what is the plaintiff and what is the defendant? Like, what? And I still think I'm a great lawyer. I was the only person in my class who got a Skadden fellowship. I love what I do. And it's really easy to look around and be like, oh, well, this person on Reddit who got a 169, but did this, then did this, got in here, and it's just not. Take a step back, have some faith in yourself, and know that it will work out and you will get a great legal education. And there are lots of factors to consider, and you just have to be true to yourself about what those values are. And if those values are getting financial aid, that's okay. If those values are going to the best school you get into, that's okay. If your values are studying with a particular professor, that's okay. All of these things are okay. And your decision is yours alone. And you should be able to be proud of whatever that decision is without all the noise from everyone else's decision-making process.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. One last question. I think I know how you're going to answer this, but I'm going to ask anyway. What LSAT score would you say would definitely not get you into a T-14? So just to rephrase this question, sort of the lowest LSAT score for T-14 law schools. That might not be a number we know off the top of our head, but we can definitely follow up and get you that number.
You could go to, I guess if you went through law school data, you could figure out what the lowest person or the lowest reported admittance in the last year was. But that's also self-reports, so people lie and you can't be entirely sure if it's trustworthy. I would say, like, I don't know, is Cornell still 14? I'm honestly not even up to date anymore. But Cornell's median is a 172, the 25th percentile is a 169. I would bet that they have maybe one person per class that's under a 166, right? So I would say maybe like a reasonable thing would probably be like a 168. You'd still be below their 25th, but not disastrously so. Yeah.
I will add a tiny bit of color, or a slightly different perspective. I know a good number of people from my class at Michigan who were under a 165. I think that means that they probably had really stellar resumes and really stellar personal statements and really stellar recommendation letters. I have one friend who went to UCLA and she was a 158. That was really, she fought hard for that waitlist spot. She had a lot of really bad test anxiety and had always had really bad test scores and knew that was going to be a hurdle for her. I think that I don't think it is a good idea to bank on those scores to get into a T-14. I do think that sometimes it happens. But if you are really set on a T-14 school, make sure that you are building in enough time. The LSAT is learnable. It is just however much time you're going to give it. I had a friend in undergrad who gave it 3 years and got her 180. I did not have 3 years I wanted to give to it. So that was not what was going to happen for me. But if you give yourself enough time, you will get a score that you want.
So I'd love to add on, if our audience can quickly check in the chat, those of you viewing at home, you'll have access to this as well. It's a blog post that we recently updated called What are the T-14 Law Schools? And we actually break them down one by one. And we talk about what the 25th percentile LSAT score is, what the median is, and what the 75th percentile score is, to help our audience kind of gauge that as well. Definitely take a browse. We hope that answers your question. We are over time. So unfortunately, we won't have any more time for tonight's questions. I want to thank you both, Mika, Tamara, for being part of this conversation. Thank you to our audience. And please don't hesitate to book a free consultation with us where we can really dig deep and do that one-on-one and answer any more questions that may appear later on. With that being said, we'll see you all on the next webinar.
Thanks
so much.